to hear some minor differences in terminology, and that's because they are different languages. Sylvia is going to read a bit in Taiwanese, I'll read it in English, and then she'll talk about briefly what makes it such a wonderful story, you think. It's the story of an old man lived up in the mountains in Taiwan and his grandson. There are really only two characters. And they don't get to eat fish, saltwater fish up in the mountain. And this kid has been apprenticed to a carpenter in the lowlands. He's a very young boy. And the one thing Grandpa wanted him to do when he came back was bring a fish. Bring the bonito, bring the fish back so we can enjoy it. And the kid is, and the relationship, the dealings, the interaction between grandfather and grandson is just mesmerizingly good. And you will hear, if you don't understand Chinese, you'll hear, at least in my somewhat flawed translation. But for those of you who want to hear it in the language it's supposed to have been given in, here's Sylvia doing it in Taiwanese.
I'm just going to test the room. Okay, I'll just hold it.
This random thing. How about that?
Can you hear me? Okay. 阿昌后盖转来的时候，最好会当带一尾鱼转来，带伫咧山顶想要食海鱼，真无方便。带愈大条愈好哦。后摆转来，毋知影是啥物时阵呢？我是讲你转来的时啊，迄着爱看师傅。是啊，所以我讲转来时，带一尾鱼转来。转来嘛不一定有钱。我是讲有钱的时阵啊，迄嘛着爱看师傅。迄是啥物时阵才会有你钱啊？是你带我去的啊，毋是讲着爱做3年4个月师仔工无摕钱，无对，咱是去学人的功夫的。你是要搁偌久才会晓家己订一条桌啊？订桌啊，搁毋简单，我早就会啊。安尼你哪会晓搁咧做师仔工？3年4个月还袂到啊？你是去偌久啊？搁有1年半呢。敢若一世人拢做样啊共款。Thank you.
I'm sure you can hear the kid speaking when she reads it. You know who's the grandfather and who's the kid. If you're just listening on the language, I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed because in English it just doesn't do the same. But this is the beginning. That's how the next time you come home, try to bring a fish back with you. It's not easy getting saltwater fish up here on the mountain. Bring a big one if you can. But I don't know when I'll be able to come home again. I'm saying when you come home. That'll be up to the master. I know that. It's why I said to bring it back with you when you come home. When I come home, I may not have any money when I come home. I mean, when you do have the money. That'll depend on the master too. But when will he start paying your wages? You should know. You're the one who took me there. Didn't he say I'll have to be an apprentice for 3 years and 4 months before I get any pay? Yeah, that's right. You're there to learn a trade. How long before you can nail a table together all by yourself? Nailing a table is easy. I learned how to do that a long time ago. Then you shouldn't be an apprentice any longer. I haven't been there 3 years and 4 months yet. Oh, how long have you been there? I still have 1.5 years to go. That's on Saturday. Sometimes I feel I might spend my whole life there without ever finishing. From this point, then we deal with the kid actually does get a fish. And he decides he's going to bring it home and really make Grandpa happy. At this point, Sylvia, who has studied and taught the story, is going to give you a sense of why we think it's such a remarkable, almost perfect story.
As you can tell from the reading, this whole section is written in a dialogue between just Grandpa and Atang. And what I think that makes it really a great story is it is written in such a way that is directly from the two characters without authorial intervention. Sometimes you get a narrative, the author will come in and tell you this is how Chun-ming is feeling, this is how Grandpa is feeling. That Huang Chun-ming does it by just simply have the dialogue back and forth. And another thing that is more, to me, that's even more interesting is the fact that if you read it very carefully between the lines, you can see the emotional state of both characters. I think Ah is probably 12, 13 years old, and he was sent by his grandpa to work as an apprentice, and he was abused there, because they exploited him, making him do more than just learning to be a carpenter. Intellectually, he understands why he's there because there are other, he has younger brothers and sisters that he needs to help support. But emotionally, he's still a little boy. So there is that sense of resentment in his reaction to Grandpa's request. So there's that conflict. So he kept saying, well, I don't know when I'm coming back. And when I come back, I don't know if I have any money. So that reaction shows his resentment and bitterness. But by just having the character say those things, Huang Chun-ming avoids over-dramatize the emotion and make it more understandable and more acceptable to the readers, and you can understand why they're saying these things without something like Ah being a very not a very nice kid, because in a Taiwanese family you are not supposed to talk back to your elders, and so that subtle resentment is carried out very nicely. Oh, okay, I'm done.
We want to do that.
The energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at that point, as I mentioned, Ah has borrowed the master's bicycle to bring the fish back to Grandpa. They can only bring it to the lowland, and they have to come down and carry it up the mountain. And this is where the story is really interesting, in that the relationship between grandfather and grandson, which is a typical relationship. You have the older man and the boy who's going to do what he said. But then the resentment begins to become an issue, because the kid is so terribly embarrassed, and you'll find out in a moment why he's embarrassed. And he's very sad that he didn't carry out what his grandfather wanted. His grandfather is very understanding, but the last thing a 13-year-old boy wants is for his grandfather to be understanding. And that's where things start to turn just a bit, but in such a way that the tragedy, if that's what it is, it's not a major tragedy. There's really nothing in this story that lets you imagine that things are really going to turn bad. It's not that bad. It's just life and the kinds of misunderstandings, mischaracterization of issues and people that start to foul up our relationship. Sylvia you can read it Chinese if you want, but she said, for those of you who understand Chinese, maybe this is a chance you can actually hear it in Chinese, not in Taiwanese, so that you can hear the kind of language that Chun-ming uses in his very early story. Well, so here's the end, as it were.
I was going to try to read the whole thing in Taiwanese, but the sentence structures are very different for those of you who know both languages, and it requires some reorganization, rewriting, and looking up some words on online dictionary to make sure my pronunciation is accurate. So I'm going to do this part in Mandarin. 哦，在这里，带鱼回来了没有？阿超还在喝水。这几天天气不好，市场上不会有鱼的。老人您知道这几天的天气很好，不能以我们这里的天气为凭准，海上的天气最多变了。阿张故意把脸弄湿，他想这样子祖父就不知道他哭了。他把湿湿的脸抬起来说：“有鱼的。” 是一条柴鱼，在哪里？老人眼睛搜索着厨房四周，掉了，掉了，掉了。阿昌不敢看老人的脸，又把头埋在水瓢里。他实在不想再喝水了，一点也不。这怎么可能呢？老人觉得太可惜了。以前买柴鱼被抢了秤头的那阵疼痛又发作起来。但是阿康没了解老人的意思，他马上辩解地说：“真的，我没有骗你，我挂在脚踏车上吊的。脚踏车？是的，我会骑脚踏车了。”阿康等着老人为他高兴。车呢？系在山表店，挂在车上吊的。老人一个字一个字说得很清楚。阿昌完全失望了。我真的买了一条柴鱼回来，它掉在路上被卡车压糊了。那不是等于没买回来？不，我买回来了。很大声地说：“是买回来了，但是掉了，对不对？”阿昌很不高兴，总是变得那么不在乎的样子。我真的买回来了。小孩变得很气恼。我已经知道你买回来了。我没有欺骗你，我绝对没有欺骗你，我发誓。阿昌哭了。我知道你没有欺骗阿公，你向来不欺骗阿公的，只是鱼掉在路上。他安慰他。不，你不知道，我以为我在骗你。阿昌抽噎着，以后买回来不就好了吗？今天我已经买回来了，我相信你今天买鱼回来了，你还哭什么？真傻。但是我没有拿鱼回来，鱼掉了，被卡车压糊了，对不对？不，你不知道，你以为我在骗你。阿公完全相信你的话，我不相信。那么你到底要我怎么说？老人实在烦不过了，他无可奈何地摊开手。我不要你相信，我不要你相信。阿昌一边嚷，一边把拿在手里的水瓢灌在地上，像小人哞哞地哭起来。老人被他这样强的一时发了无名火，随手在门后抓起挑水的扁担，一棒就打了过去。
Almost. Yes, please.
Okay. So there's all but the last few paragraphs. We'll keep you somewhat in suspense. Exactly what happens. Ah, here you are. Did you bring the fish home? Ah-Sam kept drinking. The weather's been bad the past few days, so there wouldn't be any fish to sale in the marketplace, the old man said, knowing full well that the weather had been fine. You can't use our weather here as a gauge. Out at sea, it's always changing. Ah-Sam wetted his face so his grandfather wouldn't know he'd been crying. He looked up and said, "They're selling fish." "Well, I bought one, a bonito." "Where is it?" The old man searched the kitchen with his eyes. "I dropped it." "Dropped it?" "Dropped it." Well, Ah-Sam didn't dare look the old man in the eye, so he buried his face in the water ladle again, though he couldn't drink another drop. How could that happen?" The old man was bewildered. The pain he felt that time when he'd been cheated on the weight of the bonito returned. But Ah-Sam, not knowing how the old man felt, argued defensively. "I really did. I'm not lying here. I hung it on the handlebars of the bike, and it fell off." "The bike?" "That's right. I know how to ride a bike now." He waited to see if this made his grandfather happy. "Where is it?" "I left it in the care of a shop at the foot of the mountain." "It fell off the handlebars," the old man spoke slowly and clearly. Ah-Sam's disappointment was now complete. "I really did buy a bonito, but a truck ran over it and squashed it." "Isn't that the same as not bringing one home?" "No, I did bring one," he shouted. "That's right, you did, but you dropped it. Is that right?" Ah-Sam was angry that his grandfather had taken such a matter-of-fact attitude. "I really did bring one with me," the boy said angrily. "I'm aware of that." "I'm not lying to you. I'm not lying to you. I swear." Ah-Sam began to cry. "I know you're not lying to your grandpa. You've never lied to me. It's only that the fish fell in the road," he said in a comforting tone. "No, you don't believe me. You think I'm lying." Now Ah-Sam was sobbing. "You can bring one home next time. Won't that take care of it? But I already brought one back today." "You say you brought a fish back with you today. Well, I believe you, so what are you crying about? You're acting silly. but it never got here. It fell off and was squashed by a truck, right? No, you don't know. You don't know. You think I'm lying to you. Grandpa believes every word you're saying. I don't believe you. What do you want me to say? Beginning to lose his patience, the old man spread his hands in a helpless gesture. I don't want you to believe me. I don't want you to believe me. Hassan was shouting as he threw the ladle to the floor and began to sob again, sounding like a calf. The old man, finding himself cornered, began to fume. He reached behind the door to pick up his carrying pole and began hitting out with it, striking Hassan on the shoulder. The boy darted out of the room, the old man right on his heels. So, that's how it is. They reached a critical point there between an old man who desperately loves his grandson and a grandson who desperately wants to please his grandfather, and both of them are failing, and they know it, and they don't know what to do about it.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I'm happy to say that we connected with Huang Chun-ming. He's still getting ready. I think we have to give him a couple more minutes. Let's see. Yes, this is our screen there. And in a minute, I'm going to project the screen up there. Let's see. You have to remember it's still about 6:30. I think it's still dark there. Okay, so while we wait for Huang to get ready, I wanted to ask you, how did you come about translating Huang Chun? Was that just you picked it up in the journal? Was it a recommendation for you? How did you find him? How did you discover the work?
Yeah, I was. Can you hear me better, Mike? I was doing some translations early on. This was. I was brand new in the field for a journal in Taipei called the Chinese Pen. And I had done several short stories for the editor, Nancy Yee, who was helping me promote my career and making available to a number of other outside readers Taiwanese literature. And I did several of them, and they were nice, and they were enjoyable, and they were good practice. And then she sent Sayonara Zaijian, which is in this collection. It was a breakthrough story. It's so atypical of Huang Chun-ming in one respect. I can stop at any moment.
No, you keep going.
It's the story of in Taiwan during the 70s, a number of Japanese organizations put together sex tours to go to Taiwan and other Southeast Asian countries. And these Japanese men would pay a lot of money to travel to Taiwan and visit prostitutes. The company for which the narrator worked assigned him the task of accompanying them because he spoke Japanese. So he's a Taiwanese taking Japanese visit men to whore around with Taiwanese women. You can imagine what was going through his head. The idea that he wanted to keep the job, the idea that he had to represent Taiwan, but he also had to debase himself by being a pimp. And it's an incredibly interesting evolution of his thoughts until eventually he comes on the idea, well, why don't I put this to good use? So he begins to get a lot more money for the girls than they otherwise would because he can negotiate prices and beat them up. And then he begins to argue with some of them, and there's a dramatic ending. And he eventually resolves these emotional and psychological